The middle months of 1092 would come to be known as the Bloody Summer. The Norman Civil War had desiccated the dukely brothers Robert and William, all for naught as the final brother Richard towered unblemished over the duchy. Yet this alone was not the cause for the time to be entrenched in memory by its morbid name. The greater measure of blood was yet to be spilled, as anyone could have predicted, when King Philip of France declared war to conquer England. It was a war that aimed to place on the English throne a man with the blood of the Norman line, but the name and heart of a true Frenchman, or so the king believed. Yes, all France at last marched for Robert. At the king's behest, thousands of troops from Flanders to Aquitaine gathered under the banners of House Capet, their baggage trains piled high with provisions for a long and brutal campaign. Realm against realm, nation against nation perhaps you could say, king against king to be more precise, and all in the name of the tragic hero Count Robert of Maine. Had God finally taken note of all the conquests, territorial and copulatory, that Robert had dedicated to the Holy Lord? This exquisite turn of fate was almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, for its onset brought out the best in the recently grim Count. He had adopted the mantle of king already in his own mind. There was something more stately about demanding that people make way for him on his approach, compared to his previous use of elbows, spitting, and growls. When, after a minor battle at Les Charité, he captured Duke William III of Normandy, his behaviour was exquisite. The executioner's well-polished axe was left dormant alongside its crestfallen master. Instead, William simply abdicated the duchy back to Robert, and was imprisoned in Rouen in a room fit for a count he kindly remained. Knowing Robert, there is perhaps another explanation for his soft approach. He wished to extend some kind of amnesty to Richard, who was still in open rebellion with 3 times Robert's numbers. Richard was not impressed, and so his conquest of Normandy continued unopposed, even now threatening to capture the prison in which a comfy cell awaited him. Robert could do nothing, his favourite thing to do in any other circumstance. The chill of winter was bitter indeed, with the prospect of his inevitable dethroning hanging over his old haunt in Le Mans, the hiding place for his doomed court. Robert was in no mood to rule, and civil war stripped everyone's taste for usual court business anyway. So it was that Duchess Regent Adeline, of no other names or distinctions, sat beside Princess Mare of the royal house Stenkeling, ruling what little there was to be ruled, while the noble Duke Robert warmed himself upstairs with the latest curious courtier to win his attention. The achievements of the chamber were matched by the coming of spring, warming the Duke's mood enough for him to thoroughly sour his grapes, in a good way. He realised that he didn't have to sit and watch his lands be coiled around his brother. He could look north, to his new home, to the war on England that France was easily winning. He finally got around to thanking King Philip for his helpful warring, and announced that the men of Normandy who weren't mere bandits and allies of chaos would join the rightful conquest of England. Such proclamations were spread throughout the duchy. Well, thought Richard's men, we aren't bandits and allies of chaos, and it's going to be a lot more fun to pillage some place that we don't care about than our own homes. Why don't we return to go with the Duke? Overnight, the rebel army disappeared. By the graces of God and all his servants, Normandy was back in Robert's damp hands once again. There was just one little problem. From the perspective of the nobles of Normandy, everything had gone wrong. They had done their best to be rid of Robert, but now here he was again, more arrogant and entitled than ever. The screeching Duke had styled himself king, and wished all to know it just as strongly as he did not wish to hear the troubles of the noble families. thousands dead in a civil war, and only back progress had been made. Robert had allowed William to rule for too long. The people and lords had been shown the greener pastures that might be theirs if only the troublesome troll under the bridge could be dealt with. One Count Ralph of O became the ringleader of a fresh conspiracy to give power to William. The schemers had the troops to achieve their goal, and only needed some time to rest the men of the realm in preparation for more fighting. It seemed that there was only one way to end this madness. If William was forever to be challenging him, Robert would simply have to remove William from the picture. Then there was the matter of Richard, who had committed crimes almost equal to their younger sibling. What would become of him? Robert approached the matter in the traditional House Normandie fashion. He offered Richard an excuse to kill his own brother, and suddenly Duke and Pretender were on speaking terms again. Leaving his brothers to a cloak and dagger war in France, Robert took what few men he had left and sailed for England. It was the worst move he possibly could have made, with the duchy barely holding itself together. As soon as he was a good stone's throw from the shore, more lords suddenly pledged to support William's claim, and the rebels tripled in strength. Ralph of O could now demand Robert's surrender on imprisoned William's behalf. Robert would hear nothing of this. That is not to say he refused to listen, only that he was being bounced around on the English Channel and forcibly decorating the floors of his galley. The demand was heard by Regent Adeline then, to whom this manly drama was foreign and, in her opinion, stupid. And if Ralph had known what Adeline would say next, then he probably would have agreed that he was playing quite the fool. Amid the stately bickering of court, Adeline had visited William in the prisoner tower on several occasions, and had been quite impressed with him. He was, as was often said of him, not like other men. His soft voice and discerning eye were quite refreshing to this lonely merchant's daughter, a woman forced to sit atop a man's world. When Richard, a man who she and William could agree had far too gaudy tastes, was rumoured to be sweet-talking the guards with murderous intent, Adeline took pity on the darling ex-duke. To get to the point, Adeline took great pleasure in informing Ralph of O that William had been smuggled away to luxurious Lecce in the heel of Italy on her orders. Sunburn aside, he would be safe from undue harm there, and exile from Normandy was not such an unjust punishment for his crimes after all. Ralph and company were left embarrassed. Formal exile shattered William's legitimacy for the time being, so there was nothing they could demand anymore. They trudged home, leaving only the smirking maids and joking bards as the legacy of that once fateful day. Across the Channel, a most familiar scenario had emerged. As it happened, England was also being invaded by the Norwegians. It was 1066 all over again, only this time the Norwegians had already destroyed the English armies, so all the Anglo-Saxon nobility could do was wait to see which foreign conqueror came out on top. Robert's involvement in the early stage of the war was limited to a skirmish on the southeastern coast, for he received news of the drama in Rouen and much more besides. The unruly nobles were firmly set in their anything-but-Robert policy for the duchy. With Richard too embarrassed to do anything after so many rugs had been pulled out from under him in quick succession, the rebel-rousers had turned to Cecilia, the eldest of Robert's younger sisters. Maybe everyone in the family was going to have a pop at usurpation someday. Robert didn't especially care about the threat of a mere female, but he did care that he was no more wealthy than the average innkeep after all these years of war. He returned home to disband his armies and await the crown his good king was slaving to acquire. While such masculine labours took place, more feminine ones had been playing out in Rouen, resulting in Robert arriving home to something just as important as a crown, an heir. He named the child Robert, for 'twas the best name. It seemed that his most recent choice of nocturnal companion had achieved that which his wife or his regent had not, or at least had not told him about. Her name was Bava, and she happened to be the child of Gerbeau, the great liar of Paris. While Robert Sr. announced Robert Jr. as a legitimate child, the well-known truth to his lineage was confirmed by the Duke's choice to have Grandpa Gerbeau be the newborn's guardian. The omens surrounding the new child's arrival were rather dire. The Civil War's stresses and privations had weakened the Norman people, to the delight of the typhus bacteria taking its greedy toll on peoples high and low across the duchy. Robert was not overly concerned with the matter. After all, he didn't have this illness people were complaining about. What he did have was another sister who might be plotting to kill him, and a god that considered his life to be the stage of a great comedy for all the angels to enjoy. To be more specific, he learned that the Holy Roman Empire had started up another war for the border region of Zealand. It was exactly the matter which had caused his father's invasion of England to fail, caused him to not have the crown of England on his head already. Now, at this critical time, the wound was reopened, completing the strange cycle of history Robert had fallen into. Would the king betray Robert yet again? Would he selfishly go back on his word to protect his overly large realm when the injustice of Robert's unroyalty remained? Only time could tell. While it was the era of greatest hope for Robert, it was also a miserable low point. He was impoverished, his men were dead, his duchy was full of traitors, and his only ally was the coalition of bacteria that found a way to squeeze the life out of William of Evreux, the sponsor behind Cecilia's usurpation plans. Cecilia's popularity would suffer, but never was Robert safe. Richard had found the gall to resume gathering his own little rebel cabal. For the best, really, since it gave Robert something to focus on, a nice, achievable goal. Fratricide was the great uplifter of Normandy, after all. He could sit back, hear the heralds reporting on the war from time to time, and take relaxing, stealthy walks with his crossbow in the woods where Richard occasionally went hunting. To be a great king, it takes all sorts.